there, friends. This is sort of a short tip. Not everybody does what I'm about to describe, but I've been guilty of it. And a lot of people who have read from me have been in the past too. And it comes from a generous place because we love what we're doing. We love tarot and we want to share everything we know. The bad habit that I'm going to talk about is when a reader tells the querent or the client more about how to read cards or about how they came up with the work or the solution or the answer or whatever than they do actually talking about the answer. You know, if we're reading for somebody, our job is to do the reading. Our job, unless they've asked us to teach them tarot, is not to teach them tarot. So the purpose of this little chat is just to share with you the idea of... Is this upside down? Yeah, it is. I don't do reversals lately, as we know. Where some readers fall down when they start reading for others is that it becomes so much about the spread or the position or the technique that the reading gets lost. So as a reader, my aim is to share enough information about the spread so that what I'm seeing makes sense, but not so much that the querent gets lost and remembers the meanings of air and water, for example, instead of the spread overall, instead of the reading overall. So it takes practice and it takes balance, and I don't, and I'm not making this video because I'm like a brilliant reader who's expert at this. I'm sharing something that I've struggled with in the past, and that a trap I fall into in current readings, and in my videos when I start rambling as I am now. This is an elemental reading, so what I need to do is describe to the person I'm reading for that this card represents their career, their vocation, the things that they're passionate about, the things they want to do with their lives. This card represents their intellect and their communication issues and their mental states. This card represents their emotions, their feelings, their family and friend relationships. This card represents their work issues, life issues, family issues, the sort of more day-to-day things than the more dramatic areas here. This card represents their spiritual health, however I want to describe that, and this card sums everything up. So I want to give them just a sense of what that means, but what I don't want to do is teach them how to read tarot, because, what a lot of readers will frequently do is say, okay, this card falls into the element of fire. Fire represents blah, blah, blah. And this is a knives card, which is usually the suit of swords, and the suit of swords represents air. And astrologically, and da-da-da-da-da, and, mental states. The more that I get into the theory of tarot, the less they're going to remember about the Seven of Knives being in their career path, vocational spread. So what they need to come away from this position with is that their a project that they're working on requires them to think craftily and to try some things they haven't tried before, and maybe be a little sneaky with themselves about how they get the project done. So what worked before probably won't work again. They're going to need to be crafty. They're going to need to be creative. They may need to be a little sneaky about achieving their goal. That's the message. The message isn't that this is air in a fire position. I'll make a confession here. I don't think that astrology and tarot fit together. That's not a judgment on anyone who does, but astrology and tarot feel forced to me in a way that Kabbalah and tarot don't. Not the point. Once again, I'm rambling. That's an example. What I don't want to do when I'm reading for somebody is go into a discussion of astrology and Kabbalah. I'm talking about that now because it's interesting, hopefully, to someone who's experimenting with reading. It's not necessarily interesting to a person who came to us to find out what they should do about the fact that their project isn't going the way they want it to. You know what I mean? They care about being crafty and being creative and thinking about the problem in a new way. They don't care about the controversy over, 8 versus 11 in the major arcana, or whether astrology fits the tarot model, or even that air means mind and water means emotions. Like, I can give them just enough, but I want them to take away that in a project that's important to them right now, they need to think about going at it from a completely off-center way. Likewise with their minds, they're focusing a lot mentally on loss. They're thinking a lot about what they stand to lose, maybe because this project isn't going the way they want it to. The state of thinking about loss is creating a conflict within them because their mental state is affecting their emotional state. Do I need to get into the conflict of air and water? I can if I want to, just enough that it's not distracting from the fact that what matters here is that their mental state is focusing on loss, and that is creating an emotional impact on their day-to-day life. King of Wands in water. So in their relationships, they need to, again, demonstrate a power, a maturity, a strength of character, a passion and enthusiasm, an ability to mentor others, an ability to be strong and creative, or this person, someone like that, is having an influence on their emotional life again. But what I don't want to get into is, well, sometimes the kings represent stages on our journey, and sometimes the kings represent other people in our lives. Unless they're a tarot student that I'm trying to show my work with, or unless they're asking me to teach them how to read, they care about who this guy is or what's going to make their relationships better. You know what I mean? You can go on and on and on. The ultimate point here, though, is the balancing act of giving them just enough information about the technique and the theory that they understand how the Seven of Knives relates to their career path, or how the Five of Cups relates to their mental state or communication issues, so that they understand why things mean what they mean, because why is important. It helps people remember things. But they don't need to know that in some decks pentacles are coins, and in some decks they're discs, and in some decks they represent moons. And like, my tone is very judgy right now, and it's just, I don't know, because I'm from New England, but we all do that, or at least I think we all do, because I've done it, and many people who've read for me do it. It's a side effect of caring about something, and it's a side effect of being interested in something. But unless the person we're reading for is as deeply invested in learning tarot or as curious about it as we are, what they care about is the project, why they feel sort of tired all the time. For example, you know what I mean? That their spiritual state involves a juggling act. That they have to be practical and spiritual, for example. I don't need to get into that. I've already said it, but I don't need to get into like the Rider-Waite-Smith versus Toth, and I don't need to do all of that. Especially when scarier cards come up. This deck is not particularly scary, I should say. I got this in a trade, and I really like it, and I accidentally reversed a bunch of the cards. But if someone's staring at the big D, in a reading, they want to know what that means and what's ending. They don't necessarily need to know the history of this card. They want to know what it means. Although, now that I'm saying that, this is a case where it may be useful, especially if this card comes up in an outcome position, it may be useful in that case to do a little more talk about theory, so that they recognize that it's not necessarily about endings. It's not necessarily about dying. Sometimes it's about regeneration. Sometimes it's about fertilizing the ground with experience. Sometimes it's about transition. You know what I mean? So there are times where technique or theory can be helpful. But my job, in a way, is to alleviate fear, so they're not spending the whole... If this card is the last card in a reading, they're going to be looking at this the whole time. So that's another thing, is alleviating fears or anxieties as they read, because a lot of people who come to tarot do so with a certain amount of anxiety. It's like going to the doctor sometimes. Tell me, I hate going to the doctor, and I don't always like getting readings, to be honest with you. I need to trust a reader before I'll let them read for me. No joke, because I've had bad ones, and I don't want to be filled with anxiety about someone who's deciding to make predictions that aren't going to come true or that aren't helpful. So I look for readers who read like me, because that's what I read for myself. But it takes me a while before I warm up to having someone read for me, because if they're interested in showing off, some psychic ability, say, at my expense, I don't, there are some things I don't want to hear in a reading, there, that goes down a whole other path. I'm not even going to go there. The ultimate point, you see how I do this? The ultimate point, just to summarize again, is that when we're reading for people, what they're really interested in is the answer to their question or what the reading says. What they're not interested in, theoretically, is tarot theory or technique. And so we should try to minimize theory and technique in a reading as much as we can, and focus on meaning and context and relationship to the question, solving the question, solving the puzzle for them, or with them is a better way to say it, and less about what the combination of cups and earth, or water and earth, mean. Elemental dignities, astrology, Kabbalah, all of those things feed our well as readers, and they add to the depth and the texture. But if I go to a reading and what I take away from it is that the 22 paths on the tree of life are not assigned to the same majors cards in every system, and not what I should do about my boss, then the reading wasn't helpful. You know what I mean? I'm going to shut up now. I hope this is helpful. Look for, when you are reading for others, where you get too much into theory, and try to edit that out. And it's just a process of editing. And let me know how that goes. Be well, and I will have another video for you, I hope, very soon. Take care.